Hey guys, how's it going? Recently I came across this hardcore mod for Final Fantasy X that has been dubbed the pbirdman mod. It is stated to be a harder mod of the game itself, boasting a variety of changes that make the game harder than the vanilla version. In a nutshell, everything the player has access to has been nerfed in one way or another. The enemies are given substantial stat boosts. The enemies are also given a new array of skills and effects to use, and the changes to the structure of the side content fights. The mod is a 4-year culmination of pbirdman's intense knowledge of the game and its mechanics, along with many of the hardcore Alphabet Soup Challenge players beta testing it and providing further feedback. Check the description for a link to the video by DansG08 to download the mod and try it yourself. Timestamps as always are in the description as well. Of course, I consider myself a bit of a filthy casual with moderate knowledge for this game in particular. At this point in time, I have completed every fight with the exception of Penance, so I'd like to take a second to offer my thoughts on this mod. My main concern is that every fight felt like an absolute chore to get through. While the player won't get free for quite some time, the majority of random battles felt reliant on the escape just to get through an area. Enemies have a substantial stat boost that makes all of them very dangerous and massive resource drains. Elementals hitting the entire party, and then later having a full party dispel before they hit the entire party is one of the prime examples of this. Most of the mod was me hanging around the save sphere and then proceeding to escape until I hit the next story point. I'm not sure if this was his intent, but that's what I ended up doing because it would have taken much longer to get around otherwise. The changes were somewhat predictable and somewhat disappointing. I understand that I'll take a lot of flack for bad-mouthing his years of effort, so let me explain myself before you dislike it. I can understand the need to nerf abilities that were considered overpowered, since he basically ruined any speedrunning strategy cheese pretty effectively. Unfortunately, this had some very obvious drawbacks. First, every single debuff the player has access to has become essentially worthless. Provoke was an ability that made a few key fights incredibly easy and generally not much practical use elsewhere. It was nerfed to be near useless in those fights, which made the skill practically worthless everywhere. I don't recall ever using Provoke in my entire run because it was essentially a waste of a turn, and you don't want to waste your turns. I'm not simply picking out Provoke, because it's also the case for a lot of formerly useful abilities like Breaks or Ailment Busters. The second is that every boss fight felt like they had blanket immunities to every single ailment and debuffs that you could use on them, and some buffs. The unfortunate side effect is that every boss boils down to the same exact formula: buff yourself and then just attack. There's no real hope for strategies here like tossing a blind or science to throw them off for a couple of rounds because they're just flat out immune to it. Or they just had such high tolerances to it that it's not going to matter. There's no clever manipulations like using Reflect, so you're going to watch them eat every single cure that they use. And third, there's an insane number of completely unavoidable attacks and effects. This is probably the one thing I've found to be the most annoying. From random battles to boss fights, there always seems to be one or two aspects of the fight that you cannot avoid even with the right setups. Things like being forced to eat overdrives, full party attacks when you don't have full party heals yet, or status effects that completely ignore your resistance to it. That last one in particular makes a lot of fights feel as though they're dependent upon luck to win as opposed to actual strategy. Ironclad, for example, has an ability with a 20% chance of inflicting death that ignores your resistance, and it hits the entire party. This amounts to roughly 50% chance, a 64 out of 125 to be specific, odds that he will take out at least one party member. A similar thing happens with Shinryu and his use of Eraser. If he doesn't use it, then it's a pretty easy fight to take him out if you're hitting for max damage. If he takes out 2 players, then he's going to stop using it and get a massive luck boost. This can make the fight unwinnable because if you don't have enough luck to actually hit the dude, you're going to have to use magic, and if you don't have magic, well then you're kind of fucked. Don't recall exactly if it came up in this particular fight, but Dark Anima's Mega Graviton can very easily end your fight before it even begins if she decides to use it multiple times in a row. I have seen her use it multiple times in a row. I've seen her use that shit 3 times in a row. Obviously, I lost that fight. The fourth is that enemy stat buffs make a variety of characters pretty much worthless. Lulu is by far the worst offender of this. Her low agility makes her a detriment without having haste, and haste no longer lasts forever. Her magic stack seems to grow much slower than it used to, but that just might be the effect of the monster's increased HP because she loses the use of being an elemental killer. Kimari pretty much never saw a fight outside of casting cheer and maybe haste, since his post-grid routes were limited to Titus and Lulu. And yes, I'm gonna call him Titus, not Titus. Yuna's Aeons were nerfed to the point that bringing them out was essentially a waste of time outside of eating overdrives from particular enemies. The lowered max MP means that her cures are also severely limited, to the point where I just used her as a cure battery from running between story point and story point. She actually made Karma pretty easy to deal with because she never killed anything. Auron is probably the only character that had some use besides the main 3, since his HP was the largest. His low agility was a bit of an issue, but using a special spear on him allowed you to use a return spear to go along Riku's path for an agility fix. Oh boy, Riku dependent, holy shit. It's at an actual all-time high in this mod. Mix and use are more powerful the weaker that you are, and because you're incredibly weak in this mod, that became very apparent very quickly. Hell, just look at this fight. Look at how many fucking healing waters I'm throwing down. That's insane. Make it stop. The enemy stat buffs also lower the effectiveness of damaging overdrives, so the majority of the cast is essentially wasting their turns just by trying. Add in the fact that the overdrive gain is slower, you'll find very quickly that Riku is the only one worth saving for and using. Take a shot every time I use Final Elixir or Mighty G. And the small fifth. There's a weird dependence on magic damage. This is kind of a quick one, but randomly across the game, several fights are just flat out immune to melee damage. Outside of reading the notes, there's no real warning or explanation why. It is just there, and it feels completely bizarre and often jank. You'd think Lulu would be useful here, but her celestial weapon can't be used until you complete every arena fight, so not really. In nearly every other fight, they all got a super high magic defense, so magic is worthless there. She does come with a magic booster weapon, but you can get that so easily, it's like, why even bother with her entirely? And as a combination of all these things, I found myself using the same 2 or 3 commands throughout the entire mod. Cheer and focus pretty much became mandatory in every single fight, even though it was easily taken out in one attack most of the time. What I mean by that is the enemy kills you in one attack, so all those turns wasted cheering and focusing is no longer useful. I have used more Mega Elixirs in this mod than I have playing any other game up to this point in my entire life. I have used more Mega Elixirs in this mod than I have in my cumulative total playing every other Final Fantasy game since the time I first played one. Hell, I even include full MP and HP healing items in any other RPG as well in that list. Alright, so enough complaining. What about this mod did I actually enjoy? I quite enjoyed maxing out HP. On top of stat maxing fights adding extra spears occasionally, the Ironclad fight added a substantial amount of dark matters. I have made somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or so ribbon armors as a result of this, and that's only a slight exaggeration. It is a massive step up from my typical 1, and that was only because of the 99 that you get from monster capture. Getting to 99,999 HP was a side effect of trying out different ribbon setups just so I could beat this goddamn Dark Anima. And it's no surprise why, because you will need every bit of those HP spears just to survive all the new enemy damage. Getting Fortune Spears is also pretty fun, since you get about 5 to 8 in a single fight. Of course there's a small bug with getting 255 agility, potentially ruining your character, but that can easily be fixed by just lowering it below 255. I also had a bit of fun figuring out a new way to grind AP using a trick that not many people know about, and this trick is using the Victory overdrive mode along with overdrive to AP. There's a strange thing that it does where it always gives you a percentage of your total AP to the next level. If you add on triple AP and triple overdrive, you can essentially guarantee that you're getting anywhere from 2 to 3 levels any fight. And I say any because you can literally go to Besaid Island and grind up to 99 in like 20 fights. No joke. Of course, it's going to be slower than actually taking damage and using Comrade, but the option there is limited to Dark Ixion, since I don't remember you being able to run away from a Daunton Berry. But normally, I don't go that route. I usually use Kotos because you can keep Riku's HP low and her defense low, and you can force a counterattack, and you'd only need overdrive to AP to gain 99 levels in like 5 counters. That's just me. Whatever. So as far as Dark Anima is concerned, this fight was completely filtering me hardcore. Initially, I went into the fight with Riku, Titus, and Waka at maximum HP, 99,999, only to find out that it was a problem. It's not a problem because Mega Graviton dealt more damage, it was a problem because they would survive Oblivion. You do not want to survive Oblivion. So, I brought up the other characters up to 51,000 HP roughly, and they didn't do very well either. This was the only fight in the entire mod that I was forced to use Break MP Limit in order to win. The armors that I used had Break HP Limit, Break MP Limit, Ribbon, and Auto Haste. I also was forced to mentally keep track of my total damage during the fight, counting up to 81 for a kill. And what I mean by that is I consider 99,999 damage as 1. So every time that I dealt damage, I was keeping a mental note of the ratio of how much it does compared to a maximum damage up to the total amount of HP that she had of 8 million. And this includes all the cures that she did. This was on top of making turn decisions about whether to be aggressive or to start healing. Of course, these quick estimates aren't exactly accurate over long periods of time, so what actually ended up counting to was 84 hits before I actually won. But this was why I got so aggressive near the end of the video, because I knew I was close to winning. And this is the only fight of all the Dark Aeons that actually gave me trouble. Every other fight I essentially went 1 for 1, despite being a disgusting casual normie. Dark Bahamut made me feel like a freaking clairvoyant because I was able to accurately guess every single time when he was going to throw down a Mega Flare. Dark Shiva actually forced me to raise agility beyond 170, which I found really weird, and that was also how I figured out the 255 agility bug. I also manually added a counter, so you can see just how badly her new healing prolongs the fight for goddamn ever. It was a very tedious process, but it illustrates the point about how much more annoying she is. I think the speed boost might turn off some people from even getting beyond the first 10 seconds, but normal speed is just too slow for me these days. I saved you all the trouble of removing the sped up audio because it sounds like shit. Instead, enjoy the mashup audio from the HD remaster. If you made it this far, please consider leaving a comment, like, or dislike. I'd appreciate it, and thank you for even watching this. Take care.